Okay. Now back to our screen share. I apologize, you guys. I am not a tech savvy person, and this is a beautiful learning experience for me. Okay, so restorative can be done on a warm body. This is one of the biggest differences. Restorative is an awesome complement to an exercise routine, or at the end of your flow class or power class, coming into some restorative postures. Whereas yin needs to be done cold. It's meant to be done cold because if you're moving into yin and your body is too warm, you can have the tendency or the possibility that you're going to go too far into the posture, and you're going to go past your comfortable edge because you're already warm, and that's how things get strained. So a lot of times we'll see things like a Vin Yin class, and maybe that's not the greatest idea. We want to explore something more like a Yin Vin, where you're starting with the yin, you're starting cold, you're doing a couple of yin postures before you pick up the pace and you move into the vinyasa and the warmer flow. We don't want it to be hot practice followed by cold practice. So especially like if you've done power, if you've gone for a run, if you've gone biking, you don't want to follow it with yin. You want to follow it with restorative, or you want to follow it with gentle stretching, but not the long, deep holds. So we kind of hit on this a little bit, but how to practice yin. There are a few things to consider when practicing yin. Muscles should be cold to prevent stress from transferring from the muscles, or transferring to the muscles instead of just stressing the ligaments, joints, and tendons. So a good time to practice yin is late at night or early in the morning. And like we had mentioned, it's best not to practice yin after a yang activity. For example, running, biking, or power yoga. We want the body to be cool. So basically, my little slide titled, What Would Yin Do? In yin yoga, we're working with the plastic tissues in the body. The plastic tissues, it's the fascia, the ligaments, the joints, and the bones. The goal is to compress and stress and encourage both cellular healing and hydration for the joints and for those plastic tissues. To do this, we begin with the fascia that surrounds the muscles, and we move deep within the ligaments and joints. The long holds in our yin yoga help the fascia to open over time, and then the compression of the poses helps to starve the joint of fluid while stretching the fascia around the joint capsule. So I always use pigeon as an example. I should probably think of another pose to use as an example, but pigeon is so readily, I can, conjure up the sensation in my body, and I can conjure up what that feels like and looks like for me. But if we're applying that to pigeon pose, it's the long hold. We're helping the fascia open. We're helping to get into that area in the outer hip. And then the joint that's being starved of the fluid is the knee joint. And so then when that joint capsule is freed, and it's the meniscus around the little, around the kneecap. So when we're reopening and the joint comes back in, or the fluid comes back into the joint, when the compression is released, the joint capsule is freed, but the fascia remains stretched and more open. Fluid rushes back into the joint capsule, and it's a flood of hydration, and you feel it in the body as rebound. It's what it's called is rebound. And when we feel a rebound in practice, we feel just a flood of nutrients and oxygen back into the joint capsule. And maybe you guys recognize this from your practice, or, if you've taken a yin class and after you've held something for 5, 6, 7 minutes and you move out of that, it feels like a warm wave moving into the area, or you feel like almost like that throbbing sensation. And it's basically what we're doing with the rebound. All that nutritious material is flooding the space, the joint capsule. And what we're wanting is a compress, release, compress, release. And that's what we're wanting throughout our practice. So essentially say that we're in our pigeon pose and we're compressing, 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 and then we bring it back to a brief period of release. So let's say you come out of your pigeon, maybe you come on to a comfortable seat and you kind of windshield wiper the legs back and forth, or you're rocking or shaking the legs back and forth. That's the release after the compression. So you can include that in your transitions in a yin class. So pigeon, come back through, kind of shake out the legs, but the release is much shorter than the compression period. So you're releasing for about 60 seconds, a minute and a half before moving into the other side, and then you're compressing again and finding that release again. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay. Any questions, period, so far? Okay.
Can you stay on that slide for a second?
Yes, go back to this one.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me know when you're done.
Tara, will you be emailing out this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tara, I think you came in at the tail end, or I had just said this. So I'll say it again for those who have heard and who haven't heard. I'm going to send out mine, but then also Christine Anderson's was locked when she sent it to me. So I'm just waiting on her to unlock it, and then I'll get that forwarded too. So you guys will have these, and then what I'm hoping to do so I don't flood inboxes and bombard you is just basically once my recordings come through from the Zoom meeting, attach the 2 recordings from Saturday and Sunday, and then attach the 2 presentations from yesterday and today. And then you guys just let me know when you're done looking at this slide or if there's any other questions. I know there's a lot of info on this slide.
Thanks, Tara. I'm good. I really like the rebound idea.
I do too. And I was talking about it. My sister and I were talking about it, and she begrudgingly practices yin. It's not her favorite thing to practice. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what it is. Now I have a word that describes that kind of like wave sensation that comes back into the area that, you know, has been cut off from the blood supply. And so rebound. And so I love to think of it like that. It's the rebound. And then also it really has helped me in sequencing and with my own just personal practice, the compress, release kind of principle. So holding space in yin, a lot of this is similar to what Christine Anderson touched on yesterday. Due to the fact that we're working with such deep sensation, it is important to check in with your students throughout the process because we are here facilitating for them. We are holding space for them and for their experience. And so just basically, you know, think about what you need in your body when you're practicing this kind of practice. What do you need to hear to help you move into kind of a softer, more relaxed place? And so always the first thing for me to, you know, is my jaw clenches, the, you know, space between my eyebrows tightens, and just to hear, you know, the teacher say, is your jaw clenched? Are your shoulders tight? Immediately brings me to that place like, yes, I can, here's where I can release, here's where I can send more breath. And maybe just walking them through, you know, nothing as deep as like a yoga nidra style body scan, but just quickly, you know, starting at the crown of the head, moving all the way down to the toes. What can you release? What can you rest? What can you relax? Where can you send your breath to create more space? That's how I try to think of it a lot of times. And I'll even think of this if I have like a muscle cramp or, you know, stomach cramps. Where can I send space? Send space to that area to use your breath to create more space so everything can just kind of relax and let go. So always bringing your students back to the breath, reminding them to let go, reminding your students to have compassion with themselves and their practice, as well as just reminding them release and soften. It can serve as a huge tool for empowerment in their yin practice. And it's the same thing that I hear, you know, my teachers tell me in class is what I've been able to apply during this COVID-19 time. Because usually, you know, I'll practice my yin in studio a couple times per week. And so now it's moving to more of a home practice. And it's like I can hear the little teacher's voice in my head saying, you know, is your jaw clenched? Are your shoulders tight? You know, let release wash over you. Find release in your shoulders. Find release in your hips. Find release in the back of your neck. I can kind of hear those words coming back to me, and that's what helps me soften into the space and let go so that I can move a little bit deeper into the posture. Slow and soft music, singing bowls or nature sounds are a nice complement to yin if you choose to add music. I kind of have a little story. So the first yin class I ever took, I, meticulously put together my playlist, and I thought it was just the perfect playlist for a yin class. I was very into Pride and Prejudice at the time, and I used a lot of the Pride and Prejudice soundtrack. And as we're all sitting there in yin, and it was, our supported child's pose, our wide-legged seated forward fold, and it's this lively, quick Pride and Prejudice style flutish type music. And I realized at that point, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done a disservice to my students. I've made a mistake here. And so it's just key being, slow and soft music. At the time I had thought, okay, this is going to be absolutely perfect because it's instrumental, it's benign, I'm not going to trigger anyone. But it was much too quick, which in turn probably could have been triggering to people. So just something to keep in mind. We have some chats. Oh, for the Pride and Prejudice soundtrack, it was, if you guys know the movie, it's from one of the scenes when they're dancing, and it's just like a da-na-na-na-na-na-na, just like quick, not for yin, no good. Okay, Tasha says she once did a playlist and kept the song on loop and didn't notice till someone said at the end, oh, Tasha, you know what? It happens. I've also had it before where I have it on shuffle. That's another thing to keep in mind. Right before you hit play, before class starts, take it off shuffle. Because when your Shavasana song pops up during abs, it's not the greatest motivator. But yeah, so now basically what I choose to do, I'll do nature. Nature sounds are super nice, or I'll do recording of singing bowls. And it's a much different experience. It's funny, the different things that can kind of influence the experience of the practice. And that's all about, holding space for the practice, holding space for your students. So yeah, also just as Christine touched on yesterday with walking around the room, but make yourself available to support your students through the practice with props and modifications and adjustments. And what feels good in one person's body may not feel good in everyone's body. So a few of you know this story as well, but I'll share again just for those who haven't heard. I was teaching in a restorative class, and it applies to yin as well, but one of the first ones I had taught, I had this setup in mind for props for one of my students, and I thought it was going to be the jam. I thought it was going to be the best thing. And so I got her all propped up and all set up, and I'm thrilled with myself. My ego is coming into it, and I'm thinking, oh, this just looks lovely. This looks so comfortable. This is what I like in my body. And I'm like, how do you feel? And she's like, oh, this is no good. And so, it's not necessarily about you. You're just that vessel that's there holding space, and you're able to, if someone says this feels awful, this is no good, tear it down, start from scratch. It's not about, being embarrassed. It's about being there to serve your students so they can have the best experience possible in the space, and they can be supported and, feel that support and feel that care. Any questions, you guys? Any commentary, any experience you feel like sharing?
Tara, once because with Spotify, sometimes it'll start scanning like similar songs after.
Yes.
So I took a little bit longer coming out of Shavasana in one of my classes, and that song like
and everyone jumped a foot off their mat.
Oh, it was so embarrassing.
I feel like everyone has a handful of those stories. I feel like it happens to everyone. And if it hasn't happened to you yet, just know it's okay. It will happen to you when you least expect it. And it is what it is. It's okay. It's all part of the experience.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay. So now looking at yin from a yoga therapy perspective, something to keep in mind, always use caution when you're working with students who have injuries, and, you know, make sure they've been cleared by their doctor to practice, if it is really something that's giving them a lot of trouble. From a yoga therapy perspective, yin is not typically where we would bring our practice to work with yoga therapy or trauma-informed situations, because yin can be very activating for some people. I had mentioned in the beginning, I've cried many a time in frog pose because, you know, so much emotion can come up. It really can be activating when you're working in these places with the deep-seated emotion, combined with that sensation that you're feeling. Yes, like my slide says, yin tends to be an activating practice because there's so much sensation present in the postures, and the hold time is longer in nature. So, you know, if you're in a regular vinyasa class and you're holding warrior two, or you're holding wide-legged forward fold, and you do feel sensation, it's not for, you know, it's maybe a few breaths worth of sensation. Whereas with yin, we're holding it for so many minutes, and you really have time to deal with the sensation or deal with what comes up. You're not just moving, you know, into the next posture. So that is something to keep in mind. Maybe wait to incorporate yin until you kind of have built that relationship with your client, if you are doing one-on-one or private practice. But, you know, if you're teaching it in a studio, or if you're teaching it to a group, usually they know what they're coming for. You know, for the most part, they know what they're coming for. They know what to expect. And you can also let them know at the beginning of the class, hey, this practice can tend to dredge up emotion for people. Sometimes you might feel angry. You know, I had a teacher, and she'd always say there were certain poses and it would just evoke such anger. And she says, you know, I'm not usually an angry person, and I get into these like certain poses, and, you know, I'm just thinking of bad words, and I'm thinking like, this teacher needs to take me out of the pose. And she's talked about how it took her, it was part of her journey to learn to breathe into the experience and sit with the experience and say, you know, what does this have to offer? What wants to come up? What can I look at? What can I, you know, move through? What can I use my tools to help kind of take the wind out of the sails of this feeling, or sit with it and, you know, release it, let it go. So that's my little thing about the emotions and stuff that yin can bring up. Has anyone experienced that, where you feel angry, you feel sad, you feel feelings in your yin class? Yeah.
I don't know if it was in a yin class specifically, but there was like a period of time where pigeon pose would just like cause me to cry. So
yes.
I mean, it was like just one of those like seasons of your life, you know, but there, I would just like, and not like bawling, but like the tears would just come down, and like your head's down, so no one's like really seeing it. And I was like, wow, my hips are just the seat of everything right now, you know?
Isn't it interesting that hips seat so much? And it can be kind of interesting, just an experience for you to look at your body and, you know, kind of to be more in touch with yourself, because it's happened for me where if it's a hip opener, or if it's that double fire log where it's the one leg stacked over the other, sensation will come up right away, and I'll feel like tears spring to my eyes. And, you know, I'm like, well, I wasn't emotional going into this, but now I'm having, you know, sensation, I'm having stuff come up. And then you could move onto your back and be in a supported fish or a supine twist. And I'm like, oh, I feel fine. There's, you know, the emotion is kind of ebbed. It's just interesting what poses will evoke different feelings in different places for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. From a yoga therapy perspective, yin is also an excellent tool, though, in surgery prevention. So if you have a student who's experiencing a strain but not a tear, a yin practice can help to rebuild cartilage and provide lubrication for the joints due to the rebound effect that we had talked about. Repeated practice will help to thicken the synovial fluid.
Sarah, can I ask?
Yes.
So would you prep your class, like people maybe who are not yet familiar with yin, haven't done it much, would you say sometimes, you know, because this is a deep sensation,
Yes.
yoga, would you prepare them kind of mentally by saying it's, you know, not unusual for emotions to arise, just so they know that there's nothing wrong with them if they do start to feel that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's so important to just kind of give people a little bit of a roadmap and let them know what may arise and just let them know it's normal. I had been practicing, yin for so long, so I knew, oh yeah, I cry in certain postures, or, things will come up for me. Sometimes such and such makes me angry. But my sister, like I mentioned, she's not a super fan of yin. And she didn't realize that, emotion would come up. And so it was one of her first classes that we took together. And she was like, oh my gosh, at the end I was crying in such and such pose. And it was so embarrassing. And it's like, no, not embarrassing. Happens frequently, happens to, a lot. And if you don't cry, that's okay too. If you feel happy joy, that's okay too. But just letting people know in the beginning that, we're working deep into different parts of the body, areas that necessarily don't get a lot of attention or don't get a lot of access, and we're opening them up, and things will come up, things will pop up, maybe memory will pop up. Sometimes even just the sensation can evoke emotion, just feeling that, that kind of not sharpshooting and not pinching, but that kind of prickly sensation that you'll feel as you're releasing and you're moving deeper into the posture can bring up, frustration, or it can bring up annoyance. And just knowing like all these emotions that come up, it's part of the process and it's okay. And I'm here for support if you need a hand, if you need a prop, if there's anything that, I can do to help. But also I'll try to do, like, if we'll talk a little bit about theming, but like if I'm theming around something in particular, I'll try to let people know, here's what may come up. Here's what you can kind of expect. It's going to be longer holds. It's not a quick moving class. We're going to hold our poses for about 5 to 10 minutes a piece. And today we happen to be targeting the hips. Or today we're going to be moving through a sequence that, is to balance the chakra system, or a sequence that's more grounding, and just kind of give people, a little preview so they know what's coming and what to expect. I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's a great thing to be able to offer your class at the beginning, especially if you start in, seated meditation, give them a short little rundown before connecting to breath and sinking into the space. Any questions, you guys? Yeah, is that? Okay. So repeated practice will help to thicken the synovial fluid and make it more viscous. More viscous synovial fluid is beneficial to overall joint health. And by practicing yin, we're able to create a thicker cushion for our joints. So if you guys are familiar with a little bit, familiar with Ayurveda or the doshas, when you start to get those cold kind of crackling joints, it's what that means is vata, or there's like air moving into the joint space. And what we want to do to remedy that is we want to bring in the yin practice. And the yin practice, maybe has the kind of kapha qualities to it. And so it's thicker, it's heavier, it's slower. And by bringing in that more viscous synovial fluid to flood the joint space, we're helping to move vata out of that space. And we're helping to make it so that the overall health of the joint is healthier, creating that thicker cushion for that space. So that's just kind of an Ayurvedic lens to look at things through. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about knee injuries. The knee is the most common place that our students experience injury. And the reason that knee injuries are so prevalent is because of the body's natural kinetic chain. The hips and the shoulders are the primary joint systems in our body. And if the hips or shoulders are tight, they send the stress down through the kinetic chain to the knees, the elbows, the ankles, and the wrists. So many of our yoga poses, as well as just movements in regular exercise, running, biking, that kind of thing, focus on the lower portion of the body. So if we, call to mind warrior 1, warrior 2, crescent lunge, triangle, extended side angle, all those focus a lot on the lower portion of the body. And if you're having tightness in the hips, a lot of times it's going to, move down to the knee, and your knee will drift and lose its relationship to the hip, and it'll pull one or both of the menisci. And so the menisci are C-shaped pieces of cartilage that help the bones in the femur, the bones of the femur and tibia come together. So basically you're imagining your kneecap and you're imagining the two little C-shaped pieces of cartilage, the one that's on the inside of the knee, that's the medial menisci, and the one on the outside is the lateral one. And so, you know, I had been going through my notes and deciding what I wanted to talk about, and I was chatting with my mom about it, and she was like, you know, my knee hurts. It's kind of funny where, you know, things will connect to people and what resonates with who, and, you know, what they feel in their body. And so, you know, my mom works at an office. She works in a desk job. She has a long commute to get there, and she does a lot of sitting, and her hips are tight. And so hips are always something that, you know, she talks about needing to work on, needing to loosen. And she, you know, we don't usually talk about her knee, we'll talk about hips. And so, you know, we were talking about the menisci, or meniscuses, menisci. I feel like menisci is an odd word to say, but that's the plural of the meniscus. But so we were talking about it, and she was like, you know, my knee always hurts. And what we were able to figure out was that it's that the medial, the piece of the meniscus that's closer to the inside of the knee. And so we kind of took a look at how she does certain postures, and when she does warrior one, the knee drifts inwards. And so that's definitely a weaker point for her. And so what we had talked about was, you know, maybe doing some work to find opening in the hips and find a release in the hips, so that so much pressure is not being put on that knee from the tight hip, and maybe kind of correct the knee drifting inwards. So I just thought it was interesting, and you can, you know, look at your own body or look at the bodies of your students or clients, and it was just kind of an interesting learning experience, because we were able to kind of track back through and figure out why her knee, what was coming into play, and what poses was the knee drifting in which direction. We were kind of able to pinpoint. So I thought that was an interesting thing. So basically the menisci, they prevent bone-to-bone contact in the knee. They're very sensitive to stress placed on them by surrounding ligaments, and that's why knee injuries can be so prevalent. Often students will feel discomfort in the knee, but they'll push through the pain, which will exacerbate the problem in the long run. If the menisci are stressed, but they are not torn, we can use yin yoga to promote healing. Any questions so far on menisci or the knees? Okay. So how to promote healing in the menisci? We can promote healing in one of two ways. Oh, we have a chat. Okay, so usually the ball has to be in this. So Melissa's question is, how does a teacher judge if a joint or muscle or menisci is stressed and not torn? A lot of times the ball will be in the student's court on that. So if it's, you know, just taking care through, if like rest isn't helping, if gentle activity, you know, taking the load off of that, you know, joint, muscle, whatever we're looking at, knee, if it's not healing, and if it's you're experiencing the sharp shooting and not just like an I'm looking for a word, you guys, it's like it's not sharp shooting it, but it's just kind of like an irritant. It's not necessarily the teacher's place to judge, it's the student's place. If they're having long-term issues with a certain part of the body, it's best to go to the doctor, check in with the doctor, and get, yes.
Like dull pain?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Colleen said it, and now Sarah says it, dull pain versus shooting pain. I lost the word dull. So if you're feeling that kind of dull ache, sometimes that might signify that it's stressed. But if you're getting that sharp shooting, like you feel it and you know, then that might indicate that it's torn. But that's not our, you know, our place to diagnose. It's more of the student's relationship with their body. What are they feeling? How long have they been experiencing this? Was it a specific incident that, you know, they can kind of relate it back to? But always, I would say, check in with the doctor on that, so that, you know that they're cleared, and that, you know, with your own self, sometimes it's a little easier to know how you feel in your body. But with your students or with your clients, doctor's opinion is always the best way to go before moving forward. But if the doctor's like, yeah, it's stressed, it's angry, you know, maybe they'll recommend physical therapy, but that's where we can come in with different yin practices to help promote the healing and help to strengthen that area. So we can promote healing in one of two ways. First way is to encourage release in the hip flexors, the quads, hamstrings, and glutes. And we can help these muscles to relax and help the whole system to be more loose. This will reduce the stress on the knees and the ankles. Another approach is to use compression of the knee joint to intentionally stress the ligaments to help them thicken. So when we use stress to promote healing, we're working with the fibroblasts and the chondrocytes that regenerate fascial and muscle tissue in the body. So when stressed, these cells produce new fascia fibers that can help rebuild damaged tissue. So you're, gently taxing or gently stretching, maybe even creating micro tears. And it's these little cells, like the little worker cells, that are running back to the space, and they're like, all right, we need to rebuild the damaged tissue. And that's how to strengthen that area through those different yin postures, by taxing the area so that it rebuilds and comes back stronger. Do we need this slide for a little longer? No? Okay. So then next, basically we look at hips the same way, hip injuries. Oh, we have a chat. Yes, Sarah says similar to strength training, but for ligaments and not muscles. Yeah, absolutely. And especially thinking about it, you guys, like moving into, if you are able to build, establish your yin practice and take it with you. So one of the things I should have mentioned at the beginning, yin is not an everyday practice. We're not wanting to, hop on our mat and bust out our yin every day. That's like a 2 to 3 times a week kind of thing. We're definitely not doing yin every day. It's every other day. If you're doing it with that frequency and that consistency, because you don't want to tax the body again and again and again and again. You're wanting to tax the body, put the stress on the ligaments, on the joints, and then let it recover and give it that time to kind of recover, strengthen, and come back from the postures, and then do it again. You don't want to just keep wearing down the same joints and all of that. So similar to our knees and knee injuries is how we would address the hips and hip injuries. So the first way to come at hip injuries is looking to relax the muscles around the hip, which would be hip opening. And you can work with various internal and external rotation postures. So when we're encouraging relaxation in the hip, you might want to sequence swan, sleeping swan, dragon, and shoelace. And as some of us might know, yin postures, they tend to have different names for the same thing as with in a vinyasa or traditional asana postures. So swan is just upright pigeon. Sleeping swan is pigeon, but then you climb forward and relax into it. Dragon is lizard. And then shoelace is the same as cow face pose, where you're putting one knee on top of the other and crossing, the shin bone is parallel to the top of the mat. So that's something that would encourage, these postures would relax the hips and relax the muscles around the hip. And then the second strategy, if the goal is trying to prevent surgery and strengthen the surrounding ligaments and bones, we'd want to work with compression in the hips. So just like our compress, release that we talked about earlier, we want to compress, and then we want to let that, the fluid and oxygenated blood all come back into that space. So when we're encouraging strengthening in the ligaments, you want to sequence along the lines of like, forward fold, or, dangling pose, or seated forward fold, child's pose, frog pose. So we're strengthening instead of relaxing. Oh, okay. So we're moving into theming after this. Any questions, you guys, on hips, hip injuries, anything like that? So theming, I love to bring a theme to things, even if it's a very subtle theme and maybe only I pick up on it. It's fun for me because it lets me be creative in what I'm putting together for a class or a practice. And this goes for, not only yin, but it can go for restorative or vinyasa as well. Helps to bring your personality into the practice, and it can also help you target specific types of the body or specific seasons. So some ideas for theming, you can go through the chakras and either choose to just like look at one part of the body. So if we're looking at theming around heart chakra and doing postures that are opening through the heart, and you can just keep bringing attention back to that one chakra through the practice, or you can dedicate a practice to balancing chakras on a whole. You can theme by different body parts, target hips or target hearts, heart openers like we had mentioned. You can theme around different seasons or different elements. You can theme around things like grounding or release or opening, and maybe keep, bring the intention back to that theme. And let your students know at the beginning, today we're going to be doing a lot of poses centered around grounding. And maybe that looks like all seated postures or supine postures that emphasize connection to the earth and just that grounding, supportive energy that we feel from the grounding practice, and bringing it back to that. And that's a great thing to do, especially if we want to do it, seasonally, bring grounding in the fall. Vata season, and talk about different ways to ground and connect back to the earth, and so you can kind of bring it in, make it seasonal, as well as the element of grounding. Any questions on theming, or if any theming that you guys have come across that you enjoy working around, or theming in a class that you want to share?
One of my teachers does stories. Like she'll read a short story in class.
Oh, give us an example. How so?
I don't. It's almost if Reader's Digest kind of stories, like little inspirational short stories of people.
That's interesting. That's nice. I like that. Uplifting.
So with that said,
Yes.
that made me think, like, as the posture is being held, maybe
yes,
that's a good time to bring in something like those stories or quotes, or turn up the music a little while people are, I know we're still cueing, breathe into the space, release, but maybe something that's pretty intense could do with a little story. Is that what she's
So so my little screen doesn't show me everyone at one time. Who mentioned stories? And what was in relation to like what you just, when you were holding the pose, she'd share the story? We may have lost that
was
person.
Heather, but she's out of the screen now.
Okay, no problem. I'll give you guys, let me check the chat and then I'll give you guys my experience. Oh, chicken soup for the yin soul. Melissa, is that a book or is that an idea for a book?
As far, I'm sorry, my dog was distracting me for a minute.
Heather, okay, our question for you was, because we were talking about talking and cueing throughout, but when the stories are shared, is it during like specific postures, like you guys are settled into a posture and then she'll share like her little piece? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's when we're in a hold.
Okay. So what I like to do as far as cueing, Eva, oh, hang on, you guys. I think we have another participant trying to join. All right, we have Anna joining us. Hi, Anna or Anna. When I'm cueing for yin, similar with restorative, we have a chat. Okay, Kara, is it a real book?
Oh, I was talking about the book that Tasha said she has, The Language of Yin.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look at
I
that.
was just
I'm
looking
gonna
at
write
that.
that down, the language of yin.
I was just looking at it on Amazon like last night.
Interesting. Okay, and then Sue says she has a great book called Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses, and it's all about teaching with themes. That's one of my favorite, like I will have to look into that book because I love thinking about,
I was looking at that one too.
Yes. I have to write that down.
Some of the Tao Te Ching books are good. They have some really good short story-ish things.
Yeah. When I'm cueing, I like to, so my main thing, Eva, kind of going back to your quiz question, is just touching base on breath or coming back to intention or sending breath to areas of tightness or tension. Okay, Kara, I saw your message. Basically, it's a lot of quiet for me. I think especially when I started teaching, I would kind of fall into the trap of speaking too much and feeling like I needed to fill the space because I was uncomfortable with the space. And I know Christine had touched on this yesterday, where it's such a nice place for the teacher to be able to hold that space and keep that container and benefit from the peace and the quiet as well. And so I'll try to, we'll do body scan. It's a reminder for breath. It's a reminder to come back to intention. I'll always try to remind, if you need to come out of the posture, you're welcome to do that at any time. And then just encouraging to settle into the stillness and settle into the space. Colleen says, I had a teacher read from Tao Ching by Stephen Mitchell, and it was short poems. Oh, that's nice too, especially like relating it back to a theme. But I have more, I have like my specific things that I like to touch upon when we're getting set up in the posture is usually when I'll do alignment type things and say, okay, in this posture, we want our knee to be above the ankle. In this posture, we want the crown of our head, reaching high towards the ceiling, and kind of hit the alignment cues in the beginning of the posture. And then once you settle in, more, commenting on, stillness or grounding or breath or intention, that kind of thing. And also, as Christine had mentioned yesterday, just walking around to aid in props because, heaven forbid I'm in a pose and I need a block under my hip or, behind my shoulders, or I need it under my hands and it's out of reach. And I have to kind of break out of that concentration and go rooting around for a block. Like, I love when I can be that teacher that's present to be like, okay, this person needs a block. I'm going to grab them a block. Or, if having a teacher, it just helps the student to feel, seen, heard, and connected to, if you have those things present. That I just love it. Like, if I'm struggling and a teacher is like, here's a block, here's a bolster, and I feel like so taken care of. And so I like to bring that in too, where I, just kind of be scanning the room for what people need or what you can do to assist. And this is just my little yin and the chakras slide. Because I'm going to give some examples of poses that can go with each chakra. So if we're theming around the chakras in particular, let them know in the beginning, this is what we're doing. It's a class that's theming around chakras. A good posture for crown chakra is seated meditation. Third eye would be child's pose, crocodile pose, any pose where you're connecting the third eye into the mat. Throat is seated neck release. So you're seated and you're releasing your neck to one side, releasing it forward, releasing it to the other side. That's stimulating for throat chakra. And supported fish is a really great one for throat chakra. Heart is also supported fish or sphinx pose, and you're pulling your heart through and you're expanding across the chest. Solar plexus supine twists are great for those. And then if we're looking at sacral chakra, we're maybe doing like a dragon or lizard pose or supported bridge or butterfly. And then a good pose for root chakra is Malasana squat. And if anyone here knows me, you guys know I love me a good Malasana squat, especially with the block for support.
Hey, Tara, there's a chat comment to go back a slide.
Oh, yes, I can do that. Oh. This one?
I think that's what she wanted. It was Antonella.
Antonella, is this the one you were looking for, or do I need to go back further? Okay. And just let me know when you're done, and then we'll move forward.
That's your sister, right?
Yes.
Okay, she said she took a screenshot.
Okay, good. And you'll get it when I send out the PowerPoint also. Okay. Another theme I love, and I'm sure you can incorporate this into yin, but one of my all-time favorite vinyasa themes, I have a teacher that loves to do like a feminine, divine, girl power kind of flow. When it's funny because it'll be when it's an all-female class, she's like, "Ooh, okay, we got this. I know what we're doing today. We're doing our, girl power class," and that's one of my favorites. A fun theme to do, depending on the class. And we'll do a lot of goddess squat in those. Things like that, empowering poses. Questions or comments so far, you guys? Melissa, go ahead.
Are you guys all local? I'm doing the 300 YTT online.
Okay.
Seems like a lot of you
are local. A handful of us are local.
There was a couple of people from around the world though yesterday.
Yeah, we have like one in Ireland, one in the somewhere else in the UK.
Yeah, somebody in Canada, somebody in I think Russia or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Canada.
I'm Anna. I'm from Brazil, but I'm currently in Texas.
Does ATX mean Austin, Texas?
Yes.
Yes.
I should know that. My family's from there, and they're really about Austin.
Do you say what is a good pose to get into the fascia and the connective tissue of the shoulder? Okay. So reverse prayer hands might be a good one. So sitting in like a meditative seat and bringing your prayer hands behind your back, help opening through, I'm going to say like upper shoulder area. And then you guys, I don't have a name for this posture, but it's one I cue all the time. And you're laying on your belly, your arms are at a T, you bend. So like, let's say you're going on to the left side first, you bend through the right knee, and then you flip over onto your back, onto the side. Sarah, do you know what this pose is called?
Scorpion.
Is it scorpion or like floor scorpion, something like that?
Floor scorpion.
Floor scorpion.
One of my teachers calls it the anti-technology pose.
The anti-technology pose. That's a good.
Yeah.
But
I think Michelle calls it floor scorpion though.
Yeah.
Floor scorpion. Okay, so Michelle calls it floor scorpion. So Melissa says that you've heard it called open wing. Okay. And then Tasha, would yin be good for rebuilding supporting tissue around the discs, spine discs? Yes. I'm going to make myself a note, and after lunch, I will bring you back some information on that, because I was just scanning through that this morning, and I do have some info for you. So rebuilding, supporting tissue around discs. Yeah, especially like with like bulging discs and that kind of thing. There's absolutely a place for that in yin?
I have a spinal disorder and disc disease. So we can build the muscles to support the
Yes.
spine, but once the desiccation has started, building the muscles is really important. And the
Yes.
synovial fluid, but you can't build up that particular disc tissue, only the muscles around the spine.
Exactly. Especially once it's bone to bone, that's too late sounds like such a harsh word, but
it hurts less when it's bone to bone.
Really?
Once you get because then you don't have the disc stuff isn't coming out anymore. It's not impinging the nerves.
Yes.
So as long as your muscles are strong, it hurts less.
It hurts less. What I had been scanning over in my notes this morning was about bulging disc and what you can do to kind of help release like some of that I guess pressure would be the word, through specific postures. So yes, I can definitely look into that. And then back to Sue's question with the connective tissue in the shoulder. I love floor scorpion for a abundance of reasons, but specifically I love like when I go to like flip over, when you flip over in the floor scorpion and I really feel like this area ground into the mat. And that's one how I always say, send breath to the areas you feel sensation or you feel tightness or tension. That's like right where I send the breath to, because in the lower body you're having that hip opening action as well, and that twisting action that feels so good to me. But it's the shoulder area where I feel the tightness and where I want to kind of send breath and work into that sensation. Because someone said anti-technology pose is what their teacher calls it, especially because I tend to be hunched. If I'm driving, I'm texting, I'm on my laptop, and to be able to like open like that, it just feels like a massage, like you feel that deep pressure. Anyone else have any suggestions on shoulder yin postures?
I have a pose that I just learned like last week. I don't know what the name of it is, and I don't know if it's yin or not, but and I'm going to type it in the chat for anyone who wants to like copy paste. But you're basically like you're in the fetal position on one side.
Yeah.
Your arms are extended like an alligator, so they're straight. And
Okay.
then your top arm is circling overhead and around your body. It's really gentle and it's really nice. And you can totally feel the like the shoulder movement. And then when you kind of come so that you're like T arms, then you're kind of in like a sideline twist. It's really nice.
Now tell me this, you're on your back or your belly?
You're on your side, like you're like on the fetal position on your side.
Okay.
Yeah.
That definitely resonates. That makes sense to me. Also, so my sister, we have a chat.
Excavation. I don't know what that is.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm going to have to Google that because I don't.
I think it's Akabuja 1 and Akabuja 2. So.
Oh, Heather, you muted yourself. Come back.
Sorry.
What I was describing, is that what you saying? That's what the name of it is?
I'm wondering if we're thinking of the same thing. Like
let me Google it.
You guys are the floor, and if you're the floor, and I put my arm out, it's like just above where my eyes are, and I roll like basically onto my side, but my arm is behind me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what my teacher this morning, my yoga class, my first one this morning, she does.
That feels like it sounds nice, nice, very nice.
And your other arm is down by your side. And then Akabuja 2 is where your chin is basically on the ground and this arm is underneath with your thumb inside your fist.
Yeah.
And the same, the other arm goes down by your side, and your legs are straight in that Akabuja 2. Again, I'm probably totally slaughtering the spelling of that.
Yeah, let me Google it and see. I actually don't know the name of it, so I'm really curious now. Let me Google it.
Because that almost, from what I'm imagining, but Colleen, let us know what you find. What I'm imagining, it's almost like a variation of kind of like a thread the needle variation somewhere in there. Is that what you guys are meaning? No? Okay.
That's a little different.
I'm trying to think, like you're like on your side like this. I don't know if you guys can see me. And
yes.
You're extended, and then your top arm is rotating around your body.
Cool.
Like
Oh, that is nice. And moving
so you're
in.
like doing a clock with your arm. Like your top
Yeah.
arm is making like a circle, like your clock. And then if you went halfway, you'd be in a twist, like on your side.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
My sister, the one in the pictures, is an occupational therapist. And so one of our quote unquote hobbies that we love to talk about is different adaptive postures and
Yeah.
different things that she does with her patients.
I'm wondering
And
if I
so-
can do it and if you could see me. I don't know. Let's see. Ugh. I'm kind of on the ground. So I'm like
Yes.
I'm in a fetal position, and then my top arm is circling around. Whoops. Imagine there's like not a wall, like this. And then if you pause halfway, you'd be twisting open.
Oh, Colleen, Jennifer says what you are describing is a Pilates pinwheel.
Oh, really? Okay, that's cool. Let me Google that and see if that looks like what I'm thinking in my head.
But a lot of times my sister and I, because people get frozen shoulder
Yeah.
from that. That's a huge thing. And so she'll talk with her patients, especially if they're working like specifically in an adaptive setting and working in a chair. One of the big ones that she'll do is it's just that rotation. And so it's arm out straight, thumb is what's leading, and you're coming back and you're coming around. And so you're so it's very similar to what you're doing, but in a chair. And so she does that a lot with her patients. And even if range of motion is limited, they'll just go as far as they can and see what they can kind of do to create space in there and break up anything that's tight or causing tension and just bringing, more fluid movement.
Got this, because I have really bad, my mobility is not great, especially in like shoulders and hips. And I found this woman named Doc Jen Fit, and she's on Instagram. She's a physical therapist. And she has this exercise where your hips are stacked, you're kind of in the fetal position, and you're opening wide to a T. And then you're like closing the book across your body. And that's really good for shoulder opening and stretching the pec too.
Oh, that's so nice. That is nice. Melissa, you have one for Sue, side hand clasp. Do you want a demo? Where's Melissa? Oh, I see you. You guys, can you see Melissa?
No.
Okay, Melissa, bear with me 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing real quick and I'm going to pull it back up. Okay, are you guys all on gallery view?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Melissa, we are ready for you.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know that one.
Side hand clasp. That is nice too. The extension.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Tara, can I ask a question about
Yes.
how, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Kind of relates and it reminded me because it's this shoulder that I sometimes have issues with. I think it's just from doing too many chaturangas.
Yeah.
It reminded me of something else that I kind of forgot about that I do, which raised the question of how myofascial release with a ball. Is that just basically yin? I never thought of it though, but one thing I do is I take the block and I press like if a wall were right here.
Yes.
And go and move into a wall. And just doing that, is that basically what yin really is?
Okay, so Melissa, are you shaking? You're shaking your head no?
I am shaking my head no. So with my understanding is that with myofascial release, which I'm also a yoga Thai bodywork
Yes.
certified. So with myofascial, you're moving like the muscle usually against the lengthening. Mm-hmm. So you might be breaking up scar tissue, you might be breaking up pockets of synovial fluid, or just letting the fascia kind of move a little bit differently than it usually does.
Right.
Whereas in yin, we're lengthening and strengthening. And that's my understanding. Is that enough?
No, that's good. That makes sense. So, because I wouldn't necessarily just like Melissa said, categorize it as yin, but I do like a trigger point release, and I'll use a tennis ball because I'll get like tight in the glute and hip area, and that is one of like my favorite things to do is literally just lay on my back and have like the tennis ball in the glute area, and you can feel the release. That's one of the really cool things is like you'll hold it in the different areas and you can hold it, and it's your body is putting the pressure, you're having the release, and you can essentially feel it and then move it to the next spot. And so that's what I'll do a lot of times, like for glutes and like almost along the line of the outer hip. But I would call that more trigger point release than necessarily yin. What Melissa said made a lot of sense.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
I did have
welcome.
one more question.
Yes.
And I have also a diagnosed torn labrum in my hip.
Yes.
So, it doesn't really impede like my activity, but it does talk to me a lot louder than my left hip. Do you think that with yin, it's then I should be doing more strengthening or more relaxing if it's a torn labrum?
I'm going to touch base with Michelle on that and see what her stance on that would be, because I would imagine strengthening.
That's what I would imagine, but when I look at like the suggested areas for or poses for strengthening, those are all poses that I'm very comfortable and skilled at and doing.
Yeah.
And so I just don't know if it's that, or maybe I just need to do more strengthening of the muscles around the area. I'm not really sure.
Okay, I'll touch base on that for you, and I will hopefully have some insight after lunch on that. Jennifer says, the question of the torn labrum in Pilates we would strengthen. Yeah, that's what, like strengthening is what would resonate for me. That's what would make sense to me personally, but we'll get her feedback and we'll see what she thinks too. All right, I'm gonna go back to screen share. Bear with me. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about yin for adaptive, and I don't necessarily have slides on this, so we'll make it more of kind of a dialogue. We had started to talk a little bit about my sister, the occupational therapist, and as far as yin goes, I don't usually work with an adaptive student base for yin, but it is something that my sister does for her work, and we're passionate about coming up with different, adaptive situations for yin, because we had begun to touch on a little bit earlier, the kind of things that we're doing now, strengthening and that kind of thing can be considered definitely preventative. So, you're helping, sorry guys. You have these areas that are, giving you trouble that you want to strengthen, or tightness and tension just from driving, working, that kind of thing that you want to find release in. But also it's all preventative for the later stages in life, strengthening, making things stronger, making the joints as healthy as they can be. But what my sister's clientele is that she works with, a lot of it is the older population. And so she likes to try and incorporate as much as possible. So if that's, if you have family members that are older, or if you're working with client base that's a little bit older, or teaching classes for an older population, you can adapt a lot of yin postures for them. And you can do it seated, you can do it in a chair, and lots of props. And maybe the hold time isn't as long. Maybe it's on the lesser end of the scale. But so one of the things that I love to suggest is you can do a seated figure 4. So if you're imagining, figure 4 pose, but we are crossing the shin over the thigh, like right above the knee. So you're seated and you're doing that cross. And if that's too deep for your population, you always have an option to do it. You can use a stool. And so if instead of lifting the leg completely across over, you can essentially make that figure 4 shape, but keeping the calf and the foot on a stool. So you're still getting the opening in the outer hip, but it's not anything too deep, or ideally nothing, you know, that's causing pain or sharp shooting sensation, anything like that.
Are you like sitting on a chair then, or are you on the?
Yes, I'm in like such a tight little space here, you guys. I wish I could show you what well, no, I can't. I was gonna push my desk out, but just sitting, like you're sitting in your chair, your knees are at 90-degree angle. And if you have that range of motion, and if it's not too deep for your adaptive population, you're essentially crossing one knee over. Melissa, yes, you're awesome. Okay, can you guys see Melissa if you go back to gallery view? She's doing it right now. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. So if this isn't too deep in your clients, can you guys see? Or do I need to go back to gallery view? All right, I'm gonna stop my share. Okay, if we're all on gallery view, yes. And Heather F has it also on her screen. You guys are awesome. So that's the adaptive example of like a seated figure 4. And then if that's too deep, you're just removing the ankle off the knee and placing it diagonally on a stool, because you still feel all that in the outer hip area. So seated figure 4 is an awesome one to do. You can do a seated variation of a child's pose, especially if you have like your table or your desk space just below the chest, how mine is. So I'm seated, but you're extending forward, and you can ground your forehead into the tabletop or desk. You're extending your arms long. You feel, you know, elongation through the spine. And so that's another awesome one to work with if you're working with an adaptive population or a family member or a one-on-one client. Also for adaptive, what she does with a lot of her clients is the neck release. So if there's nothing coming into play where it's pain or, you know, anything contraindicated by the doctor, but she does a lot of neck release with her patients and just helping them with range of motion and movement in the neck. You could even very gently hold and move through the neck. We had talked about the shoulder mobility. She does a lot with her adaptive population of the shoulder rotation. This was not an ideal spot for me to speak from with all my things behind me, but you know, moving with the arm for that rotation, that mobility through the shoulder. Any questions on adaptive, or anyone else with experience with adaptive?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Okay.
Siri didn't get that.
No, Siri didn't get that. All right, I'm gonna go back to our screen share. Okay, so I have a couple of sequences that we're gonna start to go through and just go through pose by pose and different cues and recommendations for the pose. If anyone has questions, stop me along the way. So I have a sequence that I love to do. It's yin yoga for the digestive system. It's a really nice go-to kind of yin sequence to stimulate and aid digestion and provide relief when experiencing digestive issues or bloating. And so the poses we'll go through begins in a seated meditation. It moves into Malasana squat, caterpillar, fire log pose, reclined child's pose, reclined shoelace, supine twist, and into Shavasana. So in our digestive aid sequence, we're going to begin in a seated meditation. Maybe this is where we begin to build the breath, establish breath and intention. And then the kind of cues I would use, extending the crown of the head upwards, legs crossed in an easy seat. Maybe you sit on a block or a blanket. Moving into Malasana squat, my favorite pose. I would cue, so knees aligned over feet, let your feet ground down into the earth. Elbows help to leverage open the knees and finding a lift in the chest, crown of the head towards the ceiling. Hold in your Malasana squat for about 3 minutes. And tips for Malasana squat: place a block under the hips if you want to lessen the depth of the posture. And you can do it at any level. You can do it flat, medium, or tall. You could even stack more than one block on top of one another. And it's just kind of a testament to different bodies feel different things. As I've mentioned multiple times, I love Malasana squat. And it's something that I will just drop down into Malasana squat at multiple times throughout the day, almost to the point of comedy. But I have a dear friend. I remember he was one of the first, came to one of my first classes, and I didn't realize how difficult, and Malasana squat can be for certain people who have tightness in the inner thigh and outer hip. And so I thought it was like this beautiful reprieve. We all, I cue drop into Malasana squat. I give my little cues, use your elbows to open the knees. Knees are aligned over the feet. And I'm just expecting like everyone's face to be so happy and so, relieved in this posture. It's such an awesome stretch. And I look and he is struggling so much. And he was more in like it honestly looked like a goddess type pose, because it was difficult for him to have that range of motion to get down into the squat. And I think it was 4 blocks is what ended up being comfortable for his body in that position. And it's everyone's body is different. And so you can literally take 4 blocks and stick 2 and 2 on top and have a nice little seat for your Malasana squat. And we got it so that he was able to be in the posture and he was able to get, what he needed out of it for his body.
Tara, would you, I'm so excited that this is kind of your pose and your thing, because I've had a lot of questions about this particular pose.
Yes.
Just even my own personal experience in it. So is it better for your body, to be in alignment, or whatever it is, whatever's the most important in the Malasana squat, to have your heels down, or to have...
No. Oh, go ahead. You finish your question. You go ahead.
Yeah. So like I can never get my heels down, but I can get like down further. And then I feel like maybe if I get down too far, then I don't even really feel like the pose so much. So
one of my tips for Malasana squat, it's if your heels are lifting off the mat, you can place like I assume your heels aren't like this far off the mat. It's probably pretty close. Are you generally pretty close to the mat? Oh, Heather, your voice left us.
I keep doing the temporary unmuted thing with the space bar.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm like super far off, but farther, but they're not to the ground.
So this is the plight I have, or the issue I have in Skandasana, where it's like that little bit of, space where the heel is not touching the floor. If your heels are lifting off the mat, you can always like roll a little bit of the mat. So scoot your Malasana to the top or scoot your Malasana to the bottom, roll the mat a little bit, and then see what feels good to cushion underneath your foot and bring the ground closer to your heel. So you can do rolled blanket or rolled mat, but because it's not, so like assuming for my friend that we had mentioned, a thick rolled blanket maybe would have helped him in that position, but like for what you're describing, I would imagine literally rolling the mat like once or twice, sticking it under the heel, and then having that support. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I can make my feet flat if I go down farther.
If you go down farther, are you scooching your feet out wider?
Probably. So is it better to use a blanket and roll up and be a little bit higher up in the squat, or than to go deeper and be able to get my feet flat, but have my legs so far apart that I'm not really feeling...
Where you're not feeling sensation. I would say wherever you're feeling the most, you're getting the most from the posture. And to me, that seems like it would be if your heels are off the mat and you're placing the rolled up mat under the heels. I wouldn't scooch out the stance and sink deeper. I would roll and make the ground higher. And Eva, Okay, so Amy says your husband cannot do it. He fell off blocks this week trying. Oh, poor thing. And then Eva says, in yin practice, is it okay to not use a block and just hold the squat? Oh, you don't have to use a block at all. If a block aids you and a block feels best in your body, go ahead and use the block. Like sometimes you want to ground down into the block. A lot of times for yin, though, I'll just hold in the malasana squat. It's up to you. It's personal preference. You don't have to use a block. Next pose we would move into in this digestive aiding sequence would be a caterpillar, which in yin it's called caterpillar, but essentially it's a seated forward fold.
Hey, Tara.
Yes.
Before we move on, I put it in the chat booth. Yes. Do you have a strong opinion about neutral in Malasana? Do you have a strong opinion about neutral feet or externally rotated feet?
I would say externally rotated. And so usually my experience is it's 45 degree, where the feet are just kind of coming off the top of the mat. Why? Do you do it with, share your experience. Do you do it with parallel feet?
I've been cued that way. I don't.
Okay.
It doesn't fit my body.
It doesn't fit my body either. I'm just thinking about it. You know what? I believe it would probably give a different sensation. But if your feet are turned out, that's how I'm feeling the most sensation. Feet are turned out, seat is low, and then that's where I'm feeling sensation. I can't, I would have to try it and see how I felt with feet parallel, but I don't, thinking about it, I don't.
I just want to make sure that if I'm supposed to be doing it that way, I start practicing that way.
Yeah. And then Heather.
I wouldn't be able to go down as far if my feet were parallel versus turned out. Like I can sink lower turned out. And then I feel like if I was parallel, my heels probably wouldn't come flat either.
So this is, when I do it with feet parallel, I get a really strong compression in that hip crease, like right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
With my feet.
In the acetabellum, right?
Different. What?
In the acetabellum, right? Like right where the
Yes. So if I'm turned, I don't think you can see me, but anyway, if my feet are turned out, I'm getting the outer hips more in Malasana. If I make them parallel, but I still keep them close together, I'm getting a lot more in the very front, a lot of compression, and then I can actually hook my elbows over my knees and press into there some more, so I get even more compression in that very front of my hip flexors. So it's different with my feet parallel versus feet out. So
almost to the point of being a different pose.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it depends on the intention. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Eva.
Because I have not. That's okay. And then Sue says, okay, so we have a couple in our chat. So Heather N has also been cued with forward facing feet. Amy has heard it cued both ways and has to externally rotate. I have to externally rotate too, but I imagine it would feel like a completely different posture targeting a different area. And then Sue says, if Malasana is about externally rotating hips, wouldn't we want our feet to have the 45 degree angle? Yes, I agree. I agree with you. And that's what I think that it's about. I'm interested in looking more into having the cueing of the feet parallel to the sides of the mat. And
I'm wondering if it's two different names of poses too, Tara, like this way.
I think so.
I'm going to look at
so, but I'm looking for it and I can't remember.
Yeah.
Because I think they might be right. It might be two different poses if you're feeling completely different sensations in the hips. You know.
I'm going to look into that because I've always done it with external rotation.
With a forward rotation, wouldn't it almost be like a really deep chair?
Like a really deep chair. Huh. That's interesting. Yes. So any other questions on Malasana, you guys? I'm going to look into that and see if I have any enlightenment at the end of lunch. So we'll see how that goes with the external versus forward. moving into caterpillar after our malasana. So basically just coming on into a seat, extending the legs forward out in front of you. We're holding in our caterpillar for about 6 minutes, and we will fold forward. But this pose helps aid in digestion through the compression and the release of the low stomach and intestines. And we have some chats. Sarah, so for malasana squat, you're saying our hips sitting down like in toe stand in parallel.
I just can't imagine how you're getting the bend in your knees with parallel feet.
Right.
I can't picture it.
No, because I can picture toe stand with parallel feet, but I can't imagine flattening my feet.
Yeah.
It comes back to what is best in your body, and my body I don't think my body wants to do that.
My knees.
Are you able to see me? This is Eva.
Hang on, Eva. Let's go to.
I'm trying to turn my screen so you can see my feet. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Go down a little further. Right. Oh, I see your feet.
Okay. Move some stuff out of the way. All right.
Yeah.
So about here. There, I'm in.
And your heels are touching the floor.
The floor, though you could still lift, use a heel lift if you needed it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But this feels entirely different. And I've used this as prep for pigeon to help me be stronger for pigeon, because now from here, if I really use my arm strength, I could get a really deep compression in the front of my hips. It's pretty awesome. It feels fantastic. But it's entirely different from this. So I'm also wondering if it's called something else, and I don't know.
Different.
That's
Okay, that is interesting.
But in malasana, I'm using my arms, and with my feet parallel, I'm still using my arms, but it feels very different. So I will have to think about it and look in some of my books too. If I come across a name, I'll let everybody know. But I know I've done it both ways, and I think the intention is different.
Yeah.
Depending on the need.
Interesting.
But it's kind of the opposite of what opens up when you're doing hero, right? So I've just compressed that, and now I'm going to open it. Right. Now this is open. That's exactly what compressed when I did parallel feet. Does that make sense?
Interesting. That does make sense. Jennifer says if your feet are parallel and you squat and tuck your tailbone, then it helps for people with anterior tilt. I've had a PT give that to me as an exercise. Oh, that is interesting.
I was going to say that from my own experience. So what I feel is exactly on that area, like my lower back. So if I have, maybe you can see me too, I can do both ways, but it's definitely very different. So if my feet is facing forward, I can still go all the way down, and I use my arms in front of my knee. So now my tailbone's going down towards the floor. If I bring my feet, external rotate my feet, then now my tailbone goes way lower, and I can lengthen through my spine. And now I feel my on my hips, and a sense of openness on my inner thighs too. No longer on my lower back.
I'll have crazy mobility, both of you.
What did you say?
What is that?
Y'all have crazy mobility. Hip mobility, like I don't. Malasana kills me. It kills my knees. It kills my.
Maybe, I don't know.
Looking like at Google, and about half the people have them straight and half the people have them rotated, and they all say malasana.
I'm gonna look into that and see if I can find, maybe it's called something different as well, because they seem like two very different things, even though it's just a slight difference.
You could check in Light on Yoga, Tara, maybe. I was thinking about
right. I do, yeah.
See what Mr. Iyengar says.
We'll see what he says. I'm going to go back to our screen share. So I had mentioned caterpillar. It compresses through, helps to compress and release of the stomach, aids in digestion. And then this is a modification that I love in the after picture. So sitting in caterpillar before, especially if you happen to have like tightness in hamstring area, folding forward, you may not go very deep, and that's okay if you don't. That's no big deal. But to move deeper into your caterpillar, you can place a block under the tailbone to help the pelvis tilt forward and help move deeper into the fold. So essentially helping the compression in the stomach and the digestive areas to aid in the digestive process. You can also place a bolster. I didn't have a bolster handy, but you can place a bolster between your chest and your legs for more support, especially if it is, you know, a longer hold. You can place that there for support so you can kind of sink into the posture a little deeper and take some of that weight off of holding yourself up so you don't fold in too deep. But this makes a huge difference having the block under the tailbone. And then the next one, oh, we have a chat. Would you do fold and release twice or just once? Can you expand? What do you? How so?
Well, in one part you were saying you would do like compression release. So I'm just wondering if you would like hold the fold for however many minutes it was and then release and then hold the fold again.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Thank you. So I would say as far as with caterpillar, probably not, unless you wanted to do it like this. Maybe do caterpillar with a block and then release, remove the block, you know, move the legs, kind of get movement going, and then move back into caterpillar without the block, like do something a little different. And so do compress, release that way. Also, another way to do it would be a seated wide-legged fold. And so like move over the left side, do your fold, come back through center, have movement, and then move over to the right side and kind of integrate it that way into a sequence. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. From here, we're going to move into, so I always call this fire log. I know some people call it square and other people call it double pigeon. And it's the pose where you're aligning knees and ankles on top of one another. And we're holding here 6 minutes for each side. So it's one leg on top of the other and then switch. Oh, okay. So Eva, you looked it up in Light on Yoga, and Iyengar has his feet completely together on page 264. Okay, we need to look into that. That's interesting. So with our fire log pose, just like pigeon or swan as it's called in yin, it can definitely bring up a lot of sensation for tight hips. So a lot of times it doesn't necessarily look like the first picture. A lot of times if the hip is tight, then the leg on top is not meeting the ankle all the way. So if it helps, if you're fine like this, stay like this, it's absolutely fine. But if you want that support, you can always place a block between the knee and the ankle so that the knee has something to kind of rest into. And holding here 6 minutes on each side. And then what I like to do, so we start here, you're seated, and then chat. Oh, Melissa says, or a rolled up blanket that you can unroll gradually. Yeah, that's an awesome idea. So thank you for that. That is a great idea. That's a great modification. So start seated, and then you can fold forward, eventually resting forearms on the ground. And you can also use blocks. So if this is the first pose or the first picture is too much sensation, you can just notice what it feels like to bring the ground closer through the use of the blocks, and sending breath to any areas of tightness and tension. So essentially probably outer hip area. We're sending breath and awareness just to the knees. And both of these are super nice modification, especially when you're using the blocks, because you can scooch the blocks out a little further too. And it's a different sensation, like it in the shoulders and in almost like the pectoral area. So moving from our seated forward fold, we'd come back through center, maybe we'd, or our double pigeon, maybe we'd windshield wiper the legs, and then move into a supine position, coming onto our back for a reclined child's pose. I like a reclined child's pose because it's easier on the knees than a traditional child's pose, but you have options. You don't necessarily have to do this. You can always, you can always give your students an option and say, hey, if child's pose is not in your practice today, see what your body feels like in reclined child's pose, and just kind of give it a different experience or, different movement, but same benefits. And you also always have the option, just like in your regular child's pose, to widen your knees in this posture. So instead of, one wrist, the right wrist grabbing, or the right hand grabbing the left wrist, you could just take one hand on each knee and widen through the knees. And then from here, it's a really easy transition. It's really nice to go from your reclined child's pose. You can, plant your knees back into the ground, maybe windshield wiper, maybe extend your legs long into a long good morning stretch for the release portion of the compress release. But then moving into your reclined shoelace, also known as cow face pose. 6 minutes per side, so 6 minutes with one leg on top, and then switch for 6 minutes on the other. You can add your little 1 minute release in there. Maybe you do supine butterfly, reclined butterfly. Again, maybe you extend your legs out long. And again, we're compressing the lower part of digestive system, helps aid in release of the outer hips as well. And for our reclined shoelace, you begin reclined shoelace on your back with knees bent. Lift the feet over the ground so that they're like at a 90-degree angle. Your legs are kind of 90 degrees in the air, and you cross the left calf over the right knee. Grasp the foot, the ankle, or the lower shin. Just grabbing, making contact wherever feels most comfortable in your body.
Hey, Tara, do you have recommendations for reclined shoelace if arms aren't reaching the feet or hands aren't reaching the feet?
Oh, let's think about this. If arms are not reaching the feet. I wonder if you placed a block under the tailbone.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because we had the strap out and I'm there, but I didn't, I was using, so the strap is in the corner of the picture. And I cued her to use the strap with the reclined child's pose, which didn't feel great in her body. It felt better for her to hug the knees in tight. But if you wanted to use a strap for reclined child's pose, I would say each hand holds one end of the strap, and then the long part of the strap goes behind the feet. But
Eva's saying strap, and then Anna's saying straps or hold onto the knees.
Okay, let's think about this, you guys. How would we use the strap? Are we talking like strap is around the back end of the body? Anna or Eva?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I have a 3-year-old here with me, so I just want to make sure. So yeah, I would, if you can, see if I can see myself and make sure you guys can see me if you want. I don't have a strap right here. I can't see myself, so I'm not sure what I'm doing. There you go.
We can see you though.
Okay, yeah, I was just like making sure okay. So if you're like here, right? You can hold into the knees.
Yes, true.
And still keeping the tailbone pressing down towards the mat so you're not rounding.
Yes.
And you're pressing, bringing the knees closer to the belly, keeping the shoulder blades on the mat too. And then you can still feel that sensation of openings on the back of your legs, hips, and glutes without putting much pressure on the lower back.
Yes, that's nice. Instead of having to like crunch up like a roly-poly, you have more space. That makes sense. That is nice. Thank you for that.
This is Eva.
Hey, Eva.
I've only got one strap handy right this second, but you could use two.
Okay.
And you get into, I tried to make myself viewable and actually loop the foot
Okay.
so that you can pull this down.
Oh, so it's more accessible to you. That makes sense, especially if your arms aren't able to reach. Okay, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, you guys. That's, you know, because I know, especially if mainly, you know, who do you practice with the most? You practice with yourself. You know your own body better than anyone else does. And so it's awesome. I love suggestions like these because for me, you know, that pose is accessible. You know, some poses aren't accessible for me, but in particular, I don't have a problem grabbing onto my ankles in that pose. And so, you know, unless someone says, how would you modify with a strap, or what can you do if your arms don't reach? You know, I love to kind of workshop those things because it's educational for me, getting different points of view. And then,
I spent a number of years dedicated to an Iyengar studio. So I'm not certified in Iyengar, but the props, man, I've got all kinds of modifications that I've just picked up watching them work with other people. So
I love it so much. And what a nice offering, like for yourself and for your students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to our shared screen. It's a good supine twist, so nice. So the picture on the left is a supine twist variation. The picture on the right is just a, you know, regular kind of supine twist. 6 minutes per side. You're getting a gentle twist and compression through the supine twist. And sometimes it's a nice transition. So if we go back, we're in our shoelace. This is kind of an easy transition to go from. So you're in your shoelace, you release. Maybe your release is you let it go. You hold your legs up in the air and you do like a non-wall supported legs up the wall pose. And that's your, you know, 1 minute release. And then you move into the supine twist. So then you kind of place your feet down into the mat, your windshield wipering back and forth, and then you just gently let the legs fall over to one side or the other. And so that's kind of a nice variation, and that goes, you know, it transitions nicely instead of, you know, maybe doing a traditional supine twist variation. And then just kind of play around with, you can, you know, cactus the arms or bring your arms into a T. And you can always place a block. So in the picture on the left, her knee is not touching the mat. And you always have the option to put a block under the knee, or if this is one of your students, just, you know, saying, do you mind, would you like a block under your knee, or can I give you a block to help support your, you know, your knee? So that's a nice thing to do. And also to intensify the twist, you can cross your top thigh over the bottom thigh. So if we're looking at the picture on the right, just move that top thigh over to move it a little deeper. So instead of one stacked on top of the other, if you shift and cross over, you experience a deeper twist. So just finding what feels good in your body and knowing you have options for yourself and also to offer for your students. And then Shavasana, corpse pose. So that's the end of the digestive little sequence. We move from our supine twist and then extend out long, do your Shavasana. And nice, sometimes I'll do my Shavasana like in a very loose version of like a Supta Baddha Konasana, so like a reclined butterfly. So sometimes for Shavasana, I'll extend my legs long. Sometimes I'll do like the slight bend in the knee and place blocks underneath the knees for support, because that'll feel good and just really help to open everything up and let everything melt into the mat. in Shavasana. And so that's an option for Shavasana. You can roll up a blanket and place it underneath the knees. And just, just feeling what works in your body. Any questions on this sequence, you guys? I wanted to give like sequences, postures, so that you, kind of have stuff in your toolkit to go to. So I hope that helped. We have a couple more of those for the afternoon to go through. So any questions, anything for me before we do lunch?
This was great. Thank you. I thought the pictures and like the description was really helpful. Next time though, you got to be the model in your own sequences, because that would be so cool too. It's like Tara on the screen, Tara in the screen, like all at the same time.
It's a Tara inception. There's multiple me's in multiple places.
No, but this was a great breakdown though. I really liked the format of this. So that was really cool. Thank you.
You guys, because I love, there is nothing I love more than being able to look at the pose, look at the cue, and go back and look at these things. And so I'm just I hope it's helpful for you. I hope, it gives you tools. And then especially theming around digestion or that, that kind of thing. There's so many different things you can theme around. And even for your own practice, you're having indigestion, you're having, constipation or some kind of issue, and you bust out your digestive yin sequence and, apply it to your own practice. So it's 12 o'clock. Let's come back from lunch between 1:10, 1:15. And before we break for lunch, is there anything else that you guys, anything you're interested in for the afternoon? Because we'll go through more of this. We'll go through about an hour of practice. Tasha says 6 p.m. here and dinner's calling for you. Anything else you guys want me to make sure I cover in the afternoon?
So are you just here in the afternoon? There's no more Christine then, or how's that working?
No more Christine. Okay. So initially it was going to be Christine was going to do more of an extended restorative, but I think she had a scheduling conflict. So she covered restorative yesterday, and that's all that she had. But if you guys have questions on her homework and stuff, I'll make sure I put her email in the chat, and I'll also make sure I send out the email when I send the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, if somebody could remind me of the homework. I kind of zoned out yesterday. I feel really bad. But if someone could put in the chat or email it, that would be great.
Yes, I will do that. When we come back from lunch, we'll touch base on restorative homework. And I also believe that she was going to give kind of an intake form.
Oh, yes, right.
So I need to remind her on that.
Oh, and then Heather N is asking if we're coming back to this Zoom link or a different one.
No, you guys return here. So I'll kind of give you guys the backstory. Initially, what we were going to do is I was going to cover the morning. Michelle was going to cover afternoon. Antonella says she needs homework, just no math, please. Yeah, no math from me. So Michelle is at the studio this afternoon. There's the situation with flooring and painting and long story, but she has to get a couple things checked off her list before flooring can go into the studio space tomorrow. For those of you that don't know, we're in the process of building out a brick and mortar My Vinyasa Practice, and it's at the finish line. And when it's at the finish line of anything having to do with building, all kinds of things are coming out of the woodwork now. So she's managing that. And so I told her I would handle the afternoon. So the afternoon we definitely have stuff to cover. We will practice, but also you guys just let me know now if there's anything that I should come prepared with for this afternoon.
Hey, Tara.
Yes.
I know this is really specific. Super struggle with hamstrings and yin. So when you were doing caterpillar, my hamstrings were hurting, thinking about when I get into that pose. So if you can do some modifications for super tight hamstrings, that would be so amazing.
Yes, I can do that.
Yay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, you guys. Enjoy your break. Antonella, do you have a question?
Just quickly, maybe another time. When if I feel the release, whenever I try to do the yin poses, like the shoestring, I was doing it while we were talking because it's better for me to remember.
Yeah.
And then when I feel more tension in one side versus the other, not symmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
do I keep going? Do I do something? That's but can be for another time. The
Okay.
answer,
So we'll hit up some hamstring stuff after. So hamstring, tight hamstrings, moving deeper. Okay. We will touch base on that because I do have an answer on that. Okay. All right, you guys. So I will see everyone back here at 1:15.
Great morning. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye, you guys.